All right. But let's get on with the show because I really want to explore this with you guys. So this is from Spite. It's Dr. John Money and the Sinister Origin of Gender Ideology, how cruel a moral experiment helped birth today's trans movement. And this is from the 5th of February, 2023. So I want to preface all of this with the fact that we are not against trans folks in any way. I have a very close friends of mine that is trans, and we absolutely respect them for who they are. And I have had friends in the past also. So it's not about shitting on anybody. It's just about getting to the truth of what's happening, the origins and the history, and going from where it started to where we are now. So, and I hate that I have to say that, but I have to, because there has been so, and just because I'm reading an article doesn't mean I necessarily agree with everything that it's saying also. I have to say that because people like to jump the gun or whatever, and say reactionary things because I think that you're attacking a certain group of people, and I'm not. We're not at all. So I wanted to, when I saw all this happening with Trans Day of Vengeance and people talking about the transgender in general and the ideology around it, I was like, I need more information on this. I need to understand this better. So let's see where it started so we can kind of see where we are now. So I found this article, and I thought that this would help. So we're all too familiar today with the basics of trans ideology. The biological sex does not determine one's gender identity. That someone born biologically male can become female. And we need to affirm a person's gender identity, even if that person is a small child. What few perhaps realize is that the intellectual origins of so much of trans ideology can be traced back to the work of one man, sexologist and psychologist Dr. John Money. Now, have you guys heard of him? Because before this, I hadn't heard his name. So he was born in 1921 and he died in 2006. He's a New Zealand born. Money was a pioneer in his field for sexuality and gender. In 1955, he was the first person to use the word gender as opposed to sex to draw a distinction between the biological attributes and the behavioral characteristics that differentiate males from females. He subsequently popularized terms like gender identity and even founded the world's first gender identity clinic at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore in the U.S. in 1966, specializing in the psychological and medical treatment of transgender patients. Above all, Money pushed the view so central to today's trans movement that though we may be born with biologically determined sex characteristics, they do not determine whether we are male or female. Without Money, it's likely that trans ideology, especially the phenomenon of trans kids, would exist in the way it does. So how confusing can that be? Talking about this Dr. Money and talking about money in the trans community when you're talking about these things. It can get very confusing if you don't know that when people are saying it's due to money, that they could be talking about either or. So not everything Money believed about gender has been absorbed by the trans movement. He believed, for instance, that children were around 2 years old. They can pass through a gender identity gate, which locks in their gender for the rest of their lives. Few trans activists would make such claim today, but the central idea that money first developed is still upheld by trans activists today, namely that being male or female is not biologically determined. This is the idea that drives trans ideology. And the notion of trans kids today, it means that someone can be both born with both male genitalia and they can still become female. I almost forgot. Okay. So why is money rarely mentioned by those promoting trans ideology today? I thought that too. I'm like, well, why is he not like, why is he not like put up on this like pedestal as like, if he came up with this ideology and, this is what people are, talking about a lot, like there's a lot of talk about trans. And we'll get to the statistics about how many people are actually trans in the United States and stuff, because I did pull those up and we have that a little bit later on. But I was like, why is it that, he's never part of the conversation? So you won't find him cited in the Stonewall education. You won't find him cited in the Stonewall education guides. You won't find him quoted in any mermaids documents. And you won't hear the hashtag Be Kind Brigade playing tribute to him. The reason is simple enough. John Money's work was creepy, cruel, and amoral, and left a trail of misery, pain, and suicide in its wake. So, we go into this part, and I want everyone to, if you're not comfortable with any of this conversation, you can always skip this show if it's not for you. So the tragedy of David Reimer. Money's vision on sex and gender were initially just developed through experimentation on intersex babies, infants born with neither definitively male nor female sex characteristics. And also, just as a side note, we did do an interview with Emma Dowd, who was born intersex. So if you want more information about that, I'll make sure that we put the link to that show, if you haven't seen it, in the description along with the rest of these links. So infants born with neither definitively male nor female sex characteristics, in Money's view, the best way to treat these babies was to use hormones and surgeries to stream them into one gender from an early age as possible. The sex organs the children were born with ultimately did not matter. The most important thing was that they were raised wholly and exclusively in that chosen gender. Money's recommendation and methods had a profound influence on treatment of intersex children and were widely accepted until relatively recently. So according to an essay in Salon, however, intersex children were not Money's main concern. He was more interested in the gender identity development of children with normal sex characteristics. He wanted to apply his theory about the malleability of gender to all children. The problem, of course, was providing his hypothesis. It would be impossible for Money to test the theory of normal infants. What mother would allow her healthy baby to be streamed into an opposite gender, undergo countless surgeries, invasive therapy sessions, all for something that might not even work? But by then, in 1997, Rolling Stone's essay recounts David Reimer fell into his hands. And this is a picture of David Reimer. And this is Brenda, same person, at age 10. And this is him living as a male at 18. So how did that happen? We're going to get into some details. When he was born in 1965, Dave Reimer David Reimer was perfectly healthy baby boy, known then as Bruce. He was one half of identical pair of twins born to Janet and Ron Reimer, a working class couple for Winnipeg, Canada. 8 months after his birth, however, he was a victim of a tragic incident that would set in motion one of the cruelest medical experiments in recent history. The Reimer twins were born with normal male genitalia, but when the twins were 7 months old, their mother noticed that both of them were having trouble urinating. A doctor diagnosed them with physmosis. Is that right? Physmosis, a relatively common condition that can be easily fixed by circumcision. It should have been a routine operation. So early one morning, while the twins were undergoing surgery, Janet and Ron received a phone call. Something had gone wrong. Either through malpractice or error, Reimer had suffered severe injuries to his penis. Doctors were unable to perform a reconstruction. And so, in the words of the psychiatrist counseling his parents at the time, Reimer would be unable to consummate marriage or have normal heterosexual relations. He would have to recognize that he is incomplete, physically defective, and that he must live apart. Like, can you imagine getting that? Like, first off, your child goes through something where the doctors mess up, and then they tell you that you have to recognize that your child's physically defective and must live apart. Like, that's your answer. I mean, it was 1966. It was definitely different times than it is now, but I can't imagine like getting that news. So Reimer's parents were distraught. They visited countless specialists in the hopes of finding some alternative, but the answer was always the same. There was nothing to be done. That was until one evening in December of 1966 when Janet and Ron Reimer were watching television. They caught a program in which a charismatic doctor was detailing his pioneering work at Johns Hopkins Gender Identity Clinic in Baltimore. Dr. John Money even claimed that a man could be transformed into a woman. So, I mean, like, if you are hearing this and you are desperate, convinced by Money's confidence and having nowhere else to run, the Reimers reached out to him. They quickly received a response. They thought they had at last found somebody who might be able to help their son, and Money had at last found his ideal test subjects. The Reimer boys were identical twins, and unlike the intersex children Money had previously been working with, both were born with definitively male sex characteristics. That meant that Brian, David's brother, Money had the perfect point of comparison or control. This was a chance for Money to test his hypothesis that all babies were born gender neutral, could be streamed into a chosen gender.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think of that so far? Steve hasn't read this. I put this together without. I wanted to.
I think it's crazy. The more I find out about these doctors, the people who brought this stuff to where it is today, and like kind of standardized it and said, well, this is what it is.
Well, yeah, don't get ahead of the story, though.
Those things, that's just crazy to me. Like the darkness that's involved in that. Like, what the these people.
This story gets darker as it goes on. I'll warn you guys now. Like, it's dark. It's gonna get darker. I mean, right now it just sounds like, wow, this doctor was trying to help.
Vicki Adams.
So by the time the Reimers made their first trip to see Money in 1967, he had earned himself a reputation as the U.S. leading expert on gender disorders. Janet and Ron trusted him. It was unclear how much they truly understood about the procedure and whether they knew how experimental it was. They just thought that Money was offering their son the chance to have a normal life, a bit as a girl. So they're going to change this baby's gender. That's what they're going to do. Janet and Ron were still hesitant, but money was persistent. He urged them to allow Reimer to undergo an operation to remove his testicles and construct a vagina as soon as possible, before the gender identity gate was closed forever. And remember, earlier in this article, he said that was about 2 years old. So they wanted to do all this before 2 years old. He was proposed that when Reimer turned 11 or 12, he could be given female hormones, according to Rolling Stone. Money hounded Reimer's parents, impressing the need on them to make a decision about the surgery before it was too late. And so again, against the advice of other doctors, they agreed to allow the then 22-month-old Reimer to undergo clinical castration and the construction of female genitalia. So began a lifetime of suffering and trauma. Steve, is he laying on him?
No, he's next to him. Yeah, okay, buddy.
Okay.
Hold on a second.
All right. So, as per Money's instructions, the Reimer parents raised him under the pretense that he had been born a girl, now renamed Brenda. Reimer was put in dressers and offered doll houses and sewing machines to play with. No one outside of the immediate family knew about Reimer's complicated medical situation. Even his twin brother was led to believe that Reimer had been a little girl all along. So talk like what a big, huge manipulation. You're going to lie to your child's twin and your child, and you were just always born a girl, like erasing history, erasing the past, like erasing the truth. Despite his parents' best efforts, Reimer always felt that something was wrong. Speaking in interviews later in life, he explained how both he and his brother sensed there was something out of the ordinary about him. He rejected his mother's offers to put on makeup and with her and she tore at the lacy clothes she dressed him in. Around 11, he described to a psychologist that he had an intense fear that something had been done to his genital organs.
Yes, Angela, I've heard that story about the Arquettes.
At school, Reimer exhibited a tomboyish behavior and was teased by his classmates. Even his teachers did not fully accept him. Worse still, there were yearly visits to see Money in Baltimore. According to Rolling Stone, both he and his brother Brian were subject to grueling counseling sessions, during which Money would probe the twins about their sexual development. From around the age of 6, they were questioned by Money on their sexual desires and preferences. At age 6, they were shown naked pictures of other children and adults having sex. He asked them to strip off their clothes and inspect each other's genitals, sometimes with as many as 5 or 6 other colleagues observing. Sometimes Money would take pictures. Most perverse of all, Money would often ask the young twins play a thrusting movement and compilation. What the
Copulation.
Copulation. Ugh.
So gross.
I know. It like, so this doctor like was like, yeah, I he was all about this. And this is like his life's work. This is what his work is. So pretending to have sex in various positions while he watched them, while the twins refused to do as he said, he would reportedly become irate and scream at them until they complied. What is happening in that? Steve, he's on him again. Leo keeps laying on him. Bonkers. Yes, he is.
Next to him.
It's not.
Bonkers is laying on him.
Okay.
See?
So, as Reimer told one interviewer, both he and his brother grew to dread those annual visits, even more so as Reimer approached the age of 8. This is when Money began to broach the subject of further surgery. in order to finish the internal construction of Reimer's vagina.
Reimer's vagina.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah. And this isn't, what, we're not even up to the 70s probably at this point. Which at that time was purely it was cosmetic. Like it's not going to be functional. For money, this was of the utmost importance. He did not believe that the psychological sex change would be complete without physically changing the appearance of the genitals. For Reiner, this was what he had begun to dread most of all. His aversion to surgery became painful, partially from the intense fear of hospitals and needles, but he also from the sense that this would trap him into a gender which he felt increasingly alien. In 1972, when Reimer was 7, Money published his first findings from the so-called twins case. It was portrayed as a resounding success. A man and woman, boy and girl, Money and his co-author, Dr. Inkel Earnhardt. I don't know. Is that how's
Urquhart?
I'm so not good with these names.
Yeah.
Earhart. Oh my God, don't mess with me. Described how remarkably feminine Rainier had turned out, illustrating their success with cherry-picked anecdotes from Rainier's exasperated but always hopeful parents. They said that Rainier enjoyed playing with dolls and dollhouses, especially in contrast to his brother's love of cars and tools. Oh, man. The media were soon championing Money's work. In 1973, the New York Times book described Man and Woman, Boy and Girl, the most important volume in the social sciences to appear since the Kinsey reports. We're gonna get to Kinsey. We will. We're going to get to him too. And billed it as having finally solved the age-old question of nature versus nurture, landing firmly on the side of nurture. For Money, the case became the foundation upon which many of his future writings were based. It helped to legitimize the practice of sex reassignment surgery for children across the world. The twins themselves were considerably, I know this is long, but this is like a really big foundation piece to where we're getting at with this tonight. The twins themselves were considerably less happy as Rainier grew older and began to approach puberty. His intense alienation from his own body only became more unbearable. According to Money himself, the mere mention of undergoing hormone treatments or surgery to David was enough to result in a panic so intense that it's impossible to approach any conversation on such matters without the child fleeing the room screaming. But for Money, there was no going back. The onset of puberty made it necessary to give Rainier female hormones as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think that's when I remember hearing the first time about transgender or somebody having a sex change operation was Billy Crystal playing the role of a gay man having a sex change operation in like 1977 or something, like Soap, the series Soap that was on TV.
So it was on TV.
Yeah.
That's where, like we have to remember where the propaganda usually comes from and where they usually put the things there first.
Yep.
Not saying that it's right or wrong. I'm just saying.
I hope that transition goes smoothly. Salty's like, I'm transitioning from a young prick to an old asshole.
Oh, no. Rainier's doctor, psychologist.
Need a parade, he said.
What?
He said he needs a parade.
Oh,
to celebrate. There should be fireworks or some kind of revealing something. I don't know. Some sort of asshole reveal. I don't know.
Oh my God.
Dennis Leary comes out and sings the song for you or whatever. That'll be a whole thing.
So Rainier's doctors, psychologists, and parents all managed to coax him into taking estrogen, Is that what it is?
Estrogen.
Estrogen. Estrogen.
It just looks like estrogen, but it's estrogen.
By the time he was 12, but the crucial operation was still a source of great conflict between Reimer and the adults in his life. In one incident in 1976, Money attempted to have a transsexual adult who had undergone similar procedures talk to Reimer to ease his fears. This culminated in Reimer running to the top of the. Stop, cat!
Kitten, what are you doing?
Cat's trying to open the cabinet door in the kitchen. This culminated in Ramirez running to the top of the clinic. Okay, Steve, can you help, please? Just sit there and laugh at him. It doesn't help me. Oh.
Is there something
So,
you want?
Okay. Ramirez running to the top of the clinic building and threatening to kill himself as if he was made to see Money again. That would be the last time Ramirez went to Baltimore. Money visited Ramirez's parents once more in their house in 1979. The twins attempted to hide in the basement for the duration of Money's stay. After this, Ramirez never saw Money again. With Money's influence removed from Ramirez's life, the adults around him began to lose faith in the transitioning process. And Ramirez had more freedom to live how he wanted. At age 14, he stopped living as a girl entirely. One by one, the medical team had tried to implement Money's treatment plan, gave up on the idea of subjecting David to more surgeries. Later, they had doubts about continuing to keep up the ruse at all. In March of 1980, Ramirez's father picked him up from his weekly psychiatrist appointment, drove him to get ice cream, and told him everything by the 16th birthday. Ramirez had changed his name from Brenda to David, who was taking mail. No, don't give him a treat after he did something bad. No, don't. Oh my God. Steve doesn't realize that, if the animal does something bad and then you give them a treat after, they think that you're rewarding them.
Yeah. Steve's not very bright.
No, I just like that's what you're doing.
I prefer the term swamp chicken. If we're talking about the bird that lives in all the females, swamp chicken, definitely.
What are you talking about?
He said ostrich. I'm like, no, man.
Okay, we're not. That doesn't have anything to do with what I'm saying right now.
And would you think that it would?
Okay, so in March of 1980, Ramirez's father picked him up from his weekly psychiatrist appointment, drove him to get ice cream, and told him everything. By the 16th birthday, Ramirez had changed his name. So his father finally tells him all the truth, and then he just was like, "Okay, I'm going back to who I was, who I felt like I was this whole time. Like that didn't work. The experiment didn't work." So, he was taking male hormones, and he had his breasts surgically removed. He also, because of course the hormones developed those breasts. So, he also underwent an operation to reconstruct crude, non-functioning male genitalia. Learning the truth about his sex did not ease Ramirez's suffering. He tried to kill himself twice before the age of 21. On one occasion, his parents doubted whether they should try to save him. The kid has done nothing but suffer all of his life, his mother recalled thinking at the time. Imagine feeling that sad about what was happening, where you're like, maybe I should let my child die. Like, terrific. Things began to look up for Ramirez in 1990. He got married, adopted his wife's 3 children. For a while, he even settled down with some semblance of a normal life. It was during this period that the true nature of Money's experimentation on him became public. Milton Diamond, a fellow sexologist and academic rival of Money, had long believed that the experiment on Ramirez was fundamentally flawed. He managed to track down Keith Sigmundson. Is that Sigmundson?
Sigmundson.
Who had previously overseen Ramirez's psychiatric treatment. And together, the two of them decided to set the record straight about Money's findings. So you would think that that would be a huge thing, right? Like, what? So compiling interviews with Ramir, his wife, his mother, Diamond, and Sigmundson, whatever. Paper was published in 1997 and proved incredibly controversial within the scientific community. But it did conceive a large number of pediatricians. Pediatricians? How do you say that?
Pediatrician?
I mean, I've always just called them pediatricians.
Yeah.
But it's not spelled that way. It's pediatricians.
I can't even see where the fuck you are because this thing is so laggy.
Right here.
Yeah, no, I have no idea where you are.
Okay. No, whatever.
Okay.
So that Money's hypothesis about the gender neutrality of babies had been flawed, and that his recommendation for the treatment of intersex children had in many cases caused more harm than good. The acknowledgement that Money's hypothesis was incorrect came too late for Ramir. The damage had already been done. As Slate recounts, after his brother overdosed on antidepressants in 2002 and his wife asked for a divorce, Ramir ended his own life in 2004. He was 38 years old.
Damn. That's fucking sad. Some twisted fucking shit.
And this is what... And this is the person... Will. This doctor, Dr. Money, is the one who came up with all of the gender ideology.
Yeah. He wrote the book on it, huh? Wrote his paper on it, and now because he had a PhD, he dictates.
Well, it says John Money's experiment was misdirected and cruel in attempting to demonstrate that biological sex has no bearing on whether one is female or male. He only succeeded in proving the opposite. That gender is not fluid. That it cannot be shaped at will through medical interventions and hormone treatment. There's little doubt today that Money's experiment was a callous failure. The lives of Ramir, his brother, his parents were sacrificed at the altar of an early form of gender ideology. Yet even now, too many have failed to learn the lessons of this tragedy. Institutions from children to healthcare still happily promote the ideas of gender ideology and gender fluidity. Many physicians still treat trans ideology as if it's a progressive cause that only uncaring bigots would oppose. And children are still being used by gender ideologues as fodder for trans experimentation. Yes, the Tavistock Gender Identity Clinic in the UK may be due to close over safety fears. But the idea that one can be born in the wrong body, that one's maleness or femaleness has no relation to one's biological sex, is still being regularly promoted to children from a worryingly young age. Oh my God, I'm like combining my words and my dyslexia is really bad. Worryingly young age. Moreover, trans activists want to make it even easier to change gender, and the younger they are, it seems the better. No doubt who uncritically embrace the tenets of gender ideology are entirely ignorant of its intellectual origins. They probably have no idea it was Dr. John Money who trailblazed the idea of a trans child. And they clearly have little inkling of the devastating impact Money's ideas had on young family all those years ago. What happened to David Ramir was a tragedy for him and his family. Not learning from it would be a tragedy for all of us.
Yeah. I agree.
And this is written by Lauren Smith.
That's some twisted shit for that doctor to just be like, no, this is what we're doing. This is it. It's like he was just like a predator waiting for his opportunity to, try out his theories and put them into effect, and ultimately the people, like he kills himself. Like that's just fucking horrible, man. That is horrible. And that's the guy who like people like are going to for this, for their like affirmation and stuff and their ideology. Like, well, this guy said, so this is the thing. That's fucking troubling as hell to think that he would do that to another human being. Some of the other things that you said about him, equally as troubling. What are you doing, Ketty? You can't go in the cabinet.
So if you are interested, we will be putting the link to that entire article in the notes below. I just thought, like, that's crazy. Like, this is where it came from. This is where it started. Was there? I never hear about this doctor.
Yeah. Tell us some more about this doctor.
Oh, I have more about this doctor.
Yeah, tell us about him. Because he seemed like a really nice guy. You know, just judging from this one editorial piece about him.
Well, here's another one from December 7th of 2020. Dr. John Money, father of gender theory, was a pedophile apologist.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, I could tell that he was a sweet guy.
Oh, of course.
With excellent morals.
It's just crazy. It's just absolutely crazy. Applejack, never leave a Tesla outside. What?
It says he puts them in the garage. You know, don't leave it outside.
Oh,
It costs $80,000. Probably more than that, actually.
Applejack, we're not even gonna. Okay, we're gonna tell you exactly what's wrong with apologizing for pedophiles. Okay,
we can let him figure it out.
Okay,
you don't have to just, you know, doesn't have to be completely on the nose, does it? Oh, Kevin.
So
you're being so sweet.
Would it surprise you to know that the normalization of gender fluidity is rooted in the same ideology of critical race theory? You wouldn't be surprised once you understood the whole story. So I know this is a lot of background to give you guys, but like really, I was blown away by, you know, that these were the doctors that. Well, this right here. Money is the first doctor, and then we're going to go into the second doctor that helped develop all of the things that we base so much of our knowledge on. These two doctors. So would it surprise you to know the normalization of gender fluidity is rooted in the same way? Oh yeah, I read that. Ellen Page, or Elliot Page, as he is known as today, recently came out as a transgender man. While transgenderism is a new phenomenon, numerous adults have undergone the transition to a different gender throughout history. What is new is the growing normalization of transgenderism among children in American society. Yeah, the numbers are growing, and it's happening faster than I think most people realize. And we'll get into those numbers, some of them. Instinctively, okay. You may know deep down something about this growing phenomenon just seems wrong. Your instincts would be correct. It's pointing you towards realizing that this is child sexual abuse. Your moral intuition is why you're alarmed and disturbed at the sight of kids being encouraged to be transgendered. Exploiting children's psychological illness for political power. So I thought this was a really good way to put it to explain something. Okay. If a young girl suffers from anorexia and sees herself as an obese person in the mirror, we wouldn't support her despite her desire to undergo liposuction to remove her imaginary excess fat from her emancipated body. Emaciated.
Appreciated.
Words. Yet if a young girl sees herself as a boy in the mirror, the proponents of gender politics have no issue with supporting her desire to surgically alter her body. Instead of waiting for their kids to reach adulthood before fundamentally altering their bodies, parents who buy into queer theory ideologies encourage their own children to undergo transition process while they're still minors. So I personally do not have an issue with trans people in general. I've stated this before. I don't have an issue with an adult making medical decisions for themselves. I do have issues with kids who
are left to make those decisions.
Yeah. There is just, we saw what could happen, right? In this last story. What can happen when everybody just goes along with it, thinking that that's their only option? And I'm not saying that, that I have all of the answers, but I think that we need to look at what's happening. Yeah. I think there's too many kids that are detransitioning. And the side effects of a lot of the things that these kids are that are put onto these kids. And we'll get into some of that too. And the puberty blockers and all of that. So, parents don't support their child's anorexia. So why would they support gender surgery? And then that can seem like a little extreme. Are you paying attention to the chat? Because I am not, Steve.
I was petting the cat.
I know.
Trying to keep him out of the damn thing. Yeah, no, I don't see any problem with anything anybody's saying. I think.
I know. I'm saying, like, are you paying? Because I'm not, because I'm reading.
Yeah.
Okay. So tragically for the young people who are harmed by gender transitioning process, the damage done to their bodies and this physique is long lasting. Countless numbers of children have later regretted this decision. The worst of these cases are the ones who are pressured by their own parents to continue their gender reassignment after they've changed their minds. And you can read stories from some of the survivors who were harmed by this movement. That link right there doesn't actually bring me, because I tried to go to that link when I was looking at this.
Snowy wants to know if a sex change from female to male called addictomy. And I said yes, I believe so. That's accurate.
What? I don't think that you guys know any.
Addictomy?
Yeah, that's not a correct. That is not a correct term.
I thought that it sounded medical.
No.
Sounded like.
No, it sounds like you guys are making shit up. So the history of transgender research by John Money, the long dark secret of academia, is John Money, who has an intellectual. See, that's the thing. The guys that are like the really smart doctors and stuff, like they can come up with some crazy ass shit. And people think because you're a doctor that you're automatically to believe. People believe authority, right? We've seen this in the last few years. We've seen how people just believe authority.
Oh, yeah.
And they think, oh, well, someone of authority or someone of more knowledge of this is telling me this. So
mandate me harder, daddy.
So I don't use my critical thinking skills and I'm just going to listen because they know better than me, right? That's what we're told. Yeah. And I don't go for that. I'm like, no, we need to do our own research. We need to look into it. I'm not asking anybody to replace the article's opinion, my opinion, Steve's opinion with their own. I'm just saying, question things, look at things. Let's look at all of the things. Let's look at both sides of it. Let's look at the history of it. Let's figure out where this is all coming from. Because otherwise, what is our opinion based on? If we have an opinion about this and we don't really like dig into it. Do we really hold an opinion? Opinions are like assholes, they say. Everybody's
right.
got one.
Everybody got one.
But let's have educated opinions
let's have an
based on truth.
An informed
right?
opinion.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that these articles are completely not swayed in any way or anything like that. I'm saying this is what I found, and this is what I thought was interesting and wanted to bring to everybody's attention. So the history of transgender research by John Money, a dark secret of academia. Dr. John Money was an influential intellectual who pioneered the gender theories and are currently cited as the basis for identity politics. One example of Dr. Money's research is the story of a child who was raised as a girl, even though he was born a male. And we went over that story. Under his instruction, Dr. Money theorized that gender is just a social construct, and the boy's parents raised him as a girl. And he would grow up to be a normal, mentally healthy girl. The story didn't end well for the child. The boy always thought he was a boy, even when he wore a dress, and his parents brought him until he finally, decades of abuse caught up, and he committed suicide. Before identity politics took off in the culture, cross-dressing was traditionally known as a sexual fetish. So just imagine an innocent child made to cross-dress under the direction of an expert. Of the normalization of child sexual abuse is perhaps one of the best kept open secrets in the halls of academia. And see here, you see the Kinsey Institute right here in Indiana. We're gonna be talking about Dr. Kinsey.
Let's go to Indiana.
Well, we're not gonna go there.
Well, all right.
Yeah,
we could probably get Applejack to meet us. He's right in Ohio there.
So a quick search of Dr. John Money will bring you to the Kinsey Institute. This is where he is still celebrated and is an important figure in advancing the study of sex and sexuality. The Kinsey Institute, named after Alfred Kinsey, produced papers and research was fundamental in bringing forward the sexual revolution of the 60s and 70s. Makes it sound great, right? Whereas the traditional sexual norms were topped and replaced by the era of free love. Wow, they framed that to be so well. We'll get into that, doctor, in a minute. So academia's long history of promoting sexual abuse under the guise of science. The sexual revolution, which removed all sexual restraints, referred to Alfred Kinsey so-called research on human sexuality as a scientific guiding manual. In order to break all sexual taboos, Kinsey collected data from numerous pedophiles under the guise of scientific research. It was said that Dr. Kinsey, like if you've ever heard of the Kinsey scale, that comes from this doctor. Continually encouraged these pedophiles to keep sexually abusing children for the sake of scientific research on human sexuality, which involves child sexuality. This is what the article is saying, not me. For example, scientists tracked and recorded the average stimulation time before climax of children as young as 5 months in Kinsey's sexual behavior in the human male. So this is how these doctors came up with these books and how things are. This is what everything is based on. One of those pedophiles Kinsey corresponded with was a Nazi officer, Dr. Fritz von Balsick, who raped and documented his victim's reaction in order to help with the research. There's some stuff in here that I have to jump over and stuff because it gets
this grossness factor. Yeah.
The only reason we were made aware of this pedophile's correspondence with Kinsey was due to the murder investigation of a 10-year-old, where they demanded that he released information. Um, they demanded that he release them. Interpol did, and he refused. You can watch the horrifying story behind the Kinsey report in a 1998 documentary on Britain's 4 channel. You'll be able to follow the links if you would like, and go watch the documentary. I have not watched it yet. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to stomach it. There's some really dark stuff with these doctors.
Oh God, yeah.
This is the dark history behind the sexual revolution. When the Kinsey report served as the revolutionary guiding manual, I bet you'll be less surprised to know how the Kinsey Institute, which produced the Kinsey reports, also honors Dr. John Money as an important figure to scientific research
Johnny Money
on human sexuality. And after all, Dr. John Money also defended pedophilia and just another part of human sexuality. And just so we are clear, pedophilia is a prepubescent child. That is what pedophilia is defined as, or pedophilia. They have different names for the different stages of that attraction, or I don't even know what to call it. So that's why I use the term predator instead of pedophilia or pedophile, because that is a very specific, prepubescent. So I tend to not use that term unless I know it's specifically that. So how does the normalization of pedophilia through sexual revolution relate to critical race theory? You can trace the roots to sexual revolution to the French philosopher. And I guess, his ideas set the stage for CRT craze. But this isn't about that. That wasn't like the whole point of what. So where was it? I want to make sure that I'm not getting into anything that I'm not supposed to here, or that I didn't want to. Just give me 1 second. How is everybody doing in the chat? This is a heavy subject.
It is fucked up with the, we have some crazy people in our chat, so it's working out fine. Everybody's just like, Oz is talking about, gay friends and having, fended off gay rape scenarios at least 3 times. And
jeez.
And, and he's like, he whittled it down to, gay people are just another slice of humanity. It's just another thing, right? So it's nothing.
Yeah, they just have a different sexual orientation. That doesn't make them like more or less of anything.
The funny part was Salty says, well, what did you do to deserve it, Oz Whistles, you sweet piece of ass, you?
Oh my God.
I fucking love these people.
Yeah, Grey Walker, I'm starting to like, as I dive more into this, and like I'm treading lightly as possible as I'm saying all this, because I'm not trying to be offensive or, pass judgment on anybody and on how they feel. And I respect, one of my best friends is trans, and I say this, and we talk about things very openly, so I refer to them as the pronouns that they prefer, and we talk openly about it and everything else. So it's not, but I also am trying to be sensitive to people that do feel this way, and also be sensitive to the history of it, be aware of the history of it, because it came from somewhere. But yeah, there is definitely an agenda behind what's happening.
Yeah. I would agree. It seems like that is part of the thing. And, without going into details because of the YouTubes. Yeah. Absolutely. It seems like that. And basically just turns everybody into a piggy bank for for the, the industry.
Yeah, isn't it crazy that the doctor's name is Dr. Money?
Right? That was fucking right on the nose.
Like, how ironic is that? Like,
little knew that all of this was going to happen when they made Snuffleupagus visible to everyone. Oh, bird.
Snuffleupagus was my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
What did they do to Snuffleupagus?
I don't know. I think Snuffleupagus he was a combination. He had some problems. He wasn't 100%. For a while there, only Big Bird could see him. Then everybody could see him. I don't know. He was kind of like the C word. He was like a Rona elephant. Like some people could see him. Other people saw through him. Oh, all
right.
Yeah. Baby.
Well, let's get back into this. So, Derek Jensen is a radical environmentalist who hates capitalism. He's perhaps as far left as they come yet. When Jensen made a statement that men are men and women are women due to the fact that biological sex exists, that gender activists set out to attack and destroy his career. Just like how they set out to destroy the careers of those on the right who dare to speak up against the pro-transgender movement. And see, I don't sit on either side of the political spear. I'm nonpartisan. So I try to look at things from just like taking a step back and not looking at it through a political lens. Not looking at it as it's a far right or it's a far left or it's this or it's that. Like just taking a step back and looking at the whole picture of it. Like that's what I try to do. And I try to be fair about how I present things and how I look at them and how I research them too. So in fact, public figures like J.K. Rowling, who had voiced her concern against the denial of biological sex, are viciously attacked and labeled as hateful, trans exclusionary, radical feminist bigot, or it's called a TERF. I've been called one once. I was like, wow, that's crazy. I'm definitely not a TERF. I feel like, adults do adult things and like we protect the children, and that's what it comes down to. It's always what it comes down to: protecting the innocent, the vulnerable, the ones who can't fight for themselves. That's who we protect. That's what we do as a society. That's what we do. We think 7 generations down, not just right now. Yeah. That's my, that's how I feel, but not everybody does. So one of these so-called TERF professors, Sheila Jeffries, mentioned something really poignant about the truth behind the pro-trans movement that more of us should consider. She said it's really a sexual fetish masquerading as a rights movement. And I don't know that that's the truth or not. Like, I can't say that myself. I don't think everybody falls into the same category. I don't think that I can make a blanket statement about any group of people. And I think that that's where a lot of people do, is they make blanket statements like, oh, all trans people are this, or all queer people are this, or all so-and-so people are this. And these blanket statements don't work for everybody. We don't have little boxes that we all fit in.
Little boxes on the hillside. Little boxes never take the yeah. Sorry, I just triggered my.
It's crazy button. To think that we've reached a point in society today where if you protest against the imposition of sexual fetishes on children, you'll be painted as hateful, intolerant bigot. From full cult to Kinsey to money, if you rally against robbing the innocence of children, these pro-pedophilia individuals will declare that there's nothing but a repressive conservative prude who's afraid of exploring the vastness of human sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
And then their
Okay.
closing thoughts on this was, well, I don't know about you, but yes,